So I think that if we are restoring ecological processes, it's really necessary to take a landscape approach. And so far, I think we really need that bridge between the NGOs and the government, which have been very successful in some projects such as the LIFE projects, where you've had some localized activities which have brought upon the decision-making, the governance of the government departments, but also that I think the inspiration and the innovative ideas that are coming from the NGO community. But the next step is to how to really scale that up to achieve landscape restoration at a much larger scale. And for that, I think the next step is to be improving the policies, because a lot of our landscapes have been degraded by a policy change, so by some widespread policies. That's how, in particular for Wetlands International, we've been looking at the restoration of river systems, where it's not just been one intervention, but almost like a death of 1,000 cuts of this river. So going in to do localized action is not enough. We need to be having a policy and reviewing the way we do our policy to restore at small scale across whole river basins to achieve restoration. So I think the issue is that if it's given to nature, it's not lost for human needs. The fact that by giving space to nature, we can allow nature to perform its ecological functions. In some cases, you will need some zonation. I think the traditional concept of having national parks is still very valuable. But what we want to see is when we have human developments, we have urban sprawl continuing, that there are components of green infrastructure, or now we're looking at the issue of building with nature. So when we are doing infrastructure developments, they contain means of restoration, means of nature. I mean, there's many examples in urban areas where you can start to bring in biodiversity to urban areas. So I think in terms of the biggest challenges, I think quite often they say that the challenge is the funding, but in many cases there is funding available for landscape scale restoration in rural development policies. But what we need to do is to change these around so they don't become policies which are degrading the landscape, but policies which help to regenerate some of the landscape. So I think that's one key issue of working cross-sectorally and perhaps involving more interdisciplinary approaches. So in agricultural systems, involving some ecologists, also in planning processes, to involve different experience, but also artists. I think that's also important with landscape restoration. People are not sure how it will look like. So by working with urban planners and designers and coming up with plans, I think it's sometimes quite a very powerful message of convincing people that changing to something else, changing of a different way of doing work can be quite appealing. And that's sometimes something that's worked quite well.